Welcome into episode 300 of the Sources Say podcast, your go-to Kentucky basketball and recruiting podcast on the growing KSR Podcast Network, presented by Justice Dental. Today, Nick Coffey of Sports Talk 790 joins us. The Card Connect himself. We got a big game to break down, Kentucky versus Louisville this week in the Yum Center. But before we get started, a quick message from our friends at Justice Dental. Sources Say is presented by the great team at Justice Dental. Visit one of their two Lexington locations by scheduling an appointment online at justicedental.com or by calling or texting 859-543-0700. Dr. Thompson, Dr. Justice, and their team look forward to seeing you soon. I am your host, Jack Pilgrim of Kentucky Sports Radio. Very happy to be joined by the one and only Nick Coffey. Nick, it's a big one. I'm excited to have you on. It's your first time on the show.
You're already lying. You're already lying, saying this is a big game. It's a big game for who?
All of us. I will never apologize for getting up for a UK U of L game ever.
Have you ever been in my position as a Louisville fan in the current situation? Because I don't wish it on anybody. So it is a big game every year. It's usually a game where the lead up, like the few days beforehand, it's just everybody's on the edge of their seat. The anxiousness is high, but around here, I think with Louisville fans, I don't have words for it. It's not going to be a close game, and who knows? Maybe their coach is gone before or after. It's just a mess. Not an ideal situation on the Louisville side, but I think Kentucky fans will probably have 75-80% of the crowd. So that'll be something to remember, I'm sure.
So you are the ultimate vibe check guy. That's part of the reason why I wanted to have you on to discuss what the vibe is right now, because it is such an uncertain, weird era of this rivalry. Because, again, it isn't what we're not talking about, how is Sky Clark going to match up with DJ? Like, nobody cares about that. The intricacies of that. People care about the big picture. Kenny Payne versus John Calipari. Will Kenny Payne be there? The future of the program. What's the trajectory look like? All of that stuff. So, Mr. Vibe Check himself, what is the vibe around the program right now? What is there any semblance of optimism, and what does that future look like for the Louisville program?
They're coming off a win, and there's only been 9 of them in total since Kenny's got the job. So that's maybe something, but I mean, the vibe overall from top to bottom has really just been an absolute circus. We've been in a consistent, you can't make this stuff up kind of vibe for a while now, just with not only the product on the court, but just the PR goofs that have happened with the Tyler Johnson tight situation, the whole Karan Davis mess. I mean, again, you can't make this stuff up. It seems like every day there's some kind of a talking point that just makes things look as, worse than they may actually be. So there's no optimism from the fan base. I've never seen this fan base this checked out. Last year, I think it was shock, anger, and just, disbelief. And now you're in year 2. And yes, they have won more games already. But if you watch and you trust your eyes, there really isn't a whole lot of difference from last year compared to this year. And I actually think they have some good young personnel. So I've never seen the fan base quite like this when it comes to checking the pulse, checking the vibes of optimism. I mean, to me, it's become really hard to find anybody who would claim that Kenny Payne still deserves to be the head coach. I don't think that's a personal feeling from the fan base. It's just, it's not an exaggeration, and it's not something to pile on. You could make the case that as of right now, with the results that are there and the off the court stuff, lack of transparency, and just knowing what Louisville basketball can be, you could make the case that Kenny Payne may be the worst hire in the history of the sport. I know that sounds mean, it sounds harsh, but I don't think you could sell me that it's anything other than what it is. It's been an absolute disaster. And you mentioned sort of talking about the matchups, the personnel, style of play, that kind of stuff. Not only has it not been a talking point this week with this game coming up, it hasn't been a talking point about Louisville in a while, because they've shown that they're clearly more capable than what we see with the results, right? They compete with a decent Texas team, a decent Indiana team. I mean, they've got some decent talent. It's just they're such a mess. And, they can lose to anybody. So when they play one of the best teams in the country coming up here in just a couple of days, I mean, I expect it to be one of the biggest beatdowns ever. There is a chance that maybe Calipari won't let that happen because of his respect and his friendship with Kenny Payne. But I think just with the way this game's going to go up and down, I think you'll have to be very intentional to kind of call the dogs off, if you know what I mean. So to answer your question, vibes, not great.
So I guess my next question for you is how did we get to this point? Because even as a Kentucky fan like myself, being around this program, knowing this coaching staff, knowing how Kenny Payne operated as the associate head coach at the University of Kentucky, there was a general consensus, an overwhelming consensus that Kenny Payne was going to make it as a head coach somewhere. And I'll be totally honest, I don't think there was a single Kentucky fan out there knowing the way he worked and the way the big man guru, the player whisperer, all of the traits that he became known for, that would not translate to the head coaching position, especially at a place like Louisville where it's family. It's he had all of that stuff in his back pocket, and it just feels like there is a disconnect there somewhere that we all thought he was going to make it and it was going to be an overwhelming success. We were kind of upset that it unfolded the way it did because we kind of thought that the rivalry was going to get back to where it was and could finally start taking some losses and make it actually competitive. So where did that downfall start? When did kind of the okay, we just gotta, this is a rebuild, we got to understand that we just got to get past this point, and then we're going to start kind of slowly creeping toward what the future looks like? Where was that breaking point, and how did we get to this point of no return?
Unfortunately, I mean, really since day one, there were some signs that were there. I mean, he didn't arrive in Louisville right after getting the job in a very important time when you're trying to meet players, determine who you want to keep around. I mean, I think you talk to folks around the program that are even more connected than I am that will tell you that really since day one, there were signs that maybe this guy didn't really have the chops to be a head coach. I mean, I think hiring Kenny Payne made sense. I mean, given where Louisville was, they still hadn't had any closure from the NCAA just yet. There wasn't a whole lot of interest in the job, I think, from candidates out there. So, you took a risk. You hire a guy who's never been a head coach, and there's a lot of boxes that he checks when it comes to recruiting. I mean, that's something he apparently was a big role of his for Calipari and Lexington. NBA players, all-stars, talk highly of him and his ability to relate to them and to motivate them and coach them. And it just, I think it's been a real eye opener that there is a big difference in being a head coach and being an assistant. I've tried to get the answer to that question for over a year now, talking to some guys who used to be on staff with him at Kentucky. One guy particularly who, loves Kenny. I've never met anybody. And for the record, I've never met anybody that doesn't have good things to say about Kenny Payne as a person. Even the players who've moved on and the players who, of course, are maybe here now that hate it because, of course, it's just a mess. I don't think it's anything in regards to where they don't like Kenny Payne or they think he's a bad guy or he's disingenuous. But his role at Kentucky, from what I understand, was very important. But a lot of what he did was not anything close to what a head coach does, which is normal because he wasn't the head coach. He was an assistant coach. So you just never know. It's a risk when you hire anybody. It's a bigger risk when you hire somebody at Louisville that has never been a head coach before. And, looking back, yeah, it was a mistake, but I probably would have done the same thing knowing who was realistically in play. I mean, it wasn't like you were going to go get a sitting head coach that was in a good situation to come start over at Louisville, just given the circumstances. So, I would be shocked if Kenny decides to pursue head coaching in any level after this. It just hasn't been a good fit. And, his decisions in regards to how he's built the roster has been a real head scratcher for me. He's against the transfer portal as far as guys that are veterans, guys that have played a lot of college basketball. And that's important. I mean, if you take the young talent they have and instead of adding a Karan Davis, who nobody had ever heard of, or a Danilo Jovanovic, who didn't play at Miami, and you go get veterans. I mean, I don't know how much better this team actually is because their issues are so deep-rooted, but he just didn't want to do that. I mean, there are guys who would have loved to have come to play for Louisville, despite them winning 4 games last year because of their connection to the program or something, or they're from here. That would have helped, but he didn't want to go down that path. So to answer your question, I just think it was a swing and a miss, and there really hasn't been, there have been people surrounding the program that are still working with the program that I've talked to, and I'm not talking about as assistant coaches, but just people around that have tried to help him and say, look, here's some things you can do, some things you could say, some action you could take that can only help you given the situation. And he just hasn't really listened to anybody. I mean, the way he decided to handle the Karan Davis thing, that was all him. That was all him from start to finish. People tried to correct him and keep that from turning into the mess that it did. But he's just, he has a lot of Calipari in him with the way he handles things, which makes sense given the fact that he comes from the Calipari coaching tree. He worked for him forever. But you really can't do that when you aren't the Calipari that has the resume and you're taking over. This is your first time doing this. So, it's and I hate to sound like I'm being dramatic and exaggerating, but it really has been at every turn just a complete sign that this guy is not capable of doing this job, which is unfortunate. It's sad because, as much as people want Kenny Payne to be fired, and deservedly so, it's not like anybody's happy that it worked out this way, but it really is an all-timer to see just how bad things have become. I don't think people are doing it to pile on. When you have folks who cover the sport nationally, folks that Jack, I mean, they're looking at this still in disbelief as to just how bad things have gotten.
So on my end, going to recruiting events, being around people that are the shakers and movers that put guys in different positions and are, directly involved in some of these recruiting decisions, they talked to me early on in the Kenny Payne era and was like, Kenny doesn't really want help, and we've offered to say, hey, this is a good fit, this is a good foundational piece to add. I think there was a genuine will to help nationally with Kenny Payne.
People love Kenny. There's no doubt. People want to help Kenny. Kenny is a likable guy that has a lot of resources, a lot of people in his corner. And last week when things got really bad, and I don't mean to cut you off, but that's where it got to the point where a lot of folks are out there like, hey, we don't know what he's doing. We don't know why he hasn't taken some guidance and just listened to people.
And so that was kind of my first concern is, okay, really important and powerful people in the basketball world that want to help you and believe in the Louisville program long term as this is a top 10 college basketball program in history. We can work with this, and you're the face, you kind of have the reputation, we could work with this. And there wasn't the kind of the mutual part of that to make it kind of a partnership. So I think that was kind of strike one. And then strike two, I've heard mixed things about the assistant coaches. I don't want to get your take on those three together. I've heard on one side that they're incompetent and they do nothing more than hold a clipboard, and that they've been no deeper help that Kenny, if he was going to make it at Louisville, that they didn't help the cause there. And then on the other side, I've also heard that kind of what we had been saying, Kenny is not listening to them either. So they've kind of had this mindset of, well, he's not going to listen to us when we try to lay foundational values and kind of help establish a culture and all that. If he's not willing to listen to us, then I guess we are just going to be professional clipboard holders. So what has that dynamic been with Kenny versus the assistants? Do you think that they're qualified? And I guess what is the next step? I've heard one name on my end who could potentially be the interim. I'm curious on your side what you've heard among those three.
So the assistants are one of the biggest mysteries in the entire situation because it's not quite clear if each of them have established identified roles, right? They're just assistant coaches. I mean, I know Nolan has some chops as a recruiter. And to be fair, Nolan has at times, I think, I don't want to say he's shown some immaturity, but fighting with fans on Twitter, no matter what, is never something that's going to be a good look for anybody. And it's honestly something that no head coach should ever tolerate an assistant doing. I mean, I think you'd agree if John Calipari had an assistant fighting with fans on Twitter, it would be something that would be dealt with. And Nolan did that a lot last year because I think he was blindsided by the fact that when you're here, no matter what the situation is, if you're terrible, people are going to be upset about it. And that's the territory of what this job is. Danny Manning, I don't know what he does. He's been a head coach before, never really had a whole lot of success, had a year or two at a couple of different spots where it looked like he might be somewhat of a successful coach. And there were folks that thought, okay, he could be a good assistant, or is he just still trying to cut a check, get a salary, and just kind of hang out? And by all signs, that's exactly what he's doing. Josh Jameson is somebody that nobody knows why he was hired. And I don't say that as a personal shot. I don't know him at all, but nobody was going to go hire him from Oregon. He wasn't an assistant coach. He was sort of a director of ops, kind of a GM role for the program. And I know he's got a long relationship with Kenny from his time in Oregon. But those two guys, I really didn't know what to expect. With Nolan, I understand why fans feel a little bit underwhelmed, and it's hard for fans to even think great about the coaching staff whenever you have the results that you have. And I doubt you've paid attention to this because why would you? But in most instances, the assistant coaches have been lifeless on the bench. I mean, no attention to detail. It's like they're just observing the game, almost like they're being punished for having to watch it. Now, at times there'll be a play here or there where they get into it, but it doesn't last. It's not sustainable. And Nolan trying to go to the G League as the semester started, that was the biggest red flag that this was not going to work. I mean, it was, and here's where we are, Jack. These kind of things come up, and it's like, wow, but you're not surprised anymore because of just the level of what this is. Nolan Smith trying to go take a G League job a week before practice starts. I mean, that's insane. Where does that happen anywhere? Right? I mean, but it's a real sign that he probably knows this thing isn't going to work. And I don't know Nolan at all. It could be that he realizes this is going to sink. I don't want to be on board when it happens. I want to go elsewhere and then bounce back. I don't know if he has any. I don't know about the relationship that Kenny has with those assistant coaches. I don't think there's turmoil, but I don't really know. But I'll say this about Nolan: he's believed to be the lead recruiter for this program, and on paper, they signed a really, really good class after winning 4 games. To me, if that's Nolan, I mean, that's him saying he still has some value. I don't want to say it's all him. Clearly, NIL is a factor as well, and it's not to say that Kenny wasn't a part of it. But Trenton Flowers bailed, and obviously that's unfortunate. But I mean, they were here, they were signed. A lot of these guys pick Louisville over some other legit programs that are very successful. So, I kind of feel like he may have just realized, look, I can go elsewhere. I'm going to go land in the G League for a while and see when another job opens up. So, I think staff from top to bottom, they needs to be held accountable. But I still am somebody, because I get asked that a lot. What do you think the future is for Nolan? When he left Duke, there were some people that thought he had such a bright future in college basketball. I'm not ready to say that he doesn't have a bright future. It's tough to know, but I think that's one of the little things throughout the entire mess here that was a really positive, and I think Nolan was mostly responsible for it. So will Nolan become the interim head coach? I'm not sure. I've heard that if that's the case, Danny Manning may walk because he's the associate head coach, and you would think that would be his opportunity to do that. And I could see somebody saying, look, this thing's bad enough. If I don't want to be the interim coach, I don't want to step in here and be associated with somebody that is directly responsible for wins and losses as the interim head coach. There's talk about bringing in somebody from the outside, and I wouldn't be against that. That just doesn't happen very often. So, your guess is as good as mine as far as what they do if they do make a move from Kenny mid-year.
It was kind of my working assumption, just my loose conversations with the few people I do know around those parts, that Nolan would be the interim guy, and I didn't know the Danny Manning aspect of it, which would make, it makes sense on paper. Why would he not feel some type of way about it? But you kind of, there is a risk that comes with it. Like, yes, that you do get your own program for however long that takes. Maybe it's an entire semester. If Nolan Smith takes over and finishes strong, what does that look like? Does he get a shot? I highly doubt he gets the head coaching shot. But it is an opportunity for him. But if things continue to kind of waver and he just treads water, what does that do for his long-term career? Because we kind of saw what happened with David Paget. Like, he's now coaching high school basketball, and him taking over as the interim in that situation didn't necessarily catapult his career.
He looks like John Wooden now compared to this staff, but your point's well made.
So it is a tricky situation that I don't think anybody would just mindlessly, blindly take that role.
Oh, I'm totally with you.
I got it.
I think some fans assume that would be a no-brainer, and I get why. When you're thinking about your career long-term, it will be where more attention's on you than has ever been. Even for Danny. Danny was never leading a top-tier program that was having a whole lot of success. It's not that everybody in college basketball is going to wait and see what Danny Manning can do. But if you're Nolan, I think, you got to pick your spots as far as when you want to step in and where you think you can be successful. And I think every coach on this staff is under the impression that if it's them leading or Kenny leading, there's probably not going to be a big change, in what we're seeing. So if Nolan decided to do it, I wouldn't be against it, and I wouldn't be totally shocked. But it's not crazy to me to hear that when they have even thrown out the idea of which direction they go if they make a move, they don't have they don't really. It's not like people are lining up to volunteer.
Okay, explain the Carter Knox debacle to me. What the hell was that timing? And I know there's a lot of some of the faces around the Louisville media that are vouching for Kenny Payne and are kind of using.
There's one. And I'll say his name. It's Rick Bozich. There's one.
He's still recruiting. He's still out knocking things out. How does that make any sense?
It doesn't.
What was the objective there?
It's another part of the circus here. At the time that news broke, we were all on the edge of our seat thinking any moment we're going to find out Friday news dump that he's fired. And then you hear that. It's, I can't blame Kenny if he's still trying to fight. And I don't blame Kenny if he says, look, if you're going to fire me, you pay me my money and I'll leave. Like, he has a right to do that. That's a contract. That's what contracts exist. But there's no scenario that if Kenny Payne was here, Carter Knox would come and play at Louisville. I mean, on what planet would that make sense? And if these kids decided to come back, I mean, they need to, I mean, I don't want to say something that sounds like it's way over the top, but if you're a player on this current team and you win, 7 games this year and the coaching staff is the same, why would you stay? So like they have no recruits lined up. Carter Knox is not going to come to Louisville. I think it was probably, in my guess, and you may know this better than I do, knowing the Knox family's situation with Kenny. I know Kevin and Carter Knox's father is close with Kenny. Apparently they're actually not just close throughout the recruitment, but they've become good friends, good family friends. And maybe it was a favor to Kenny to make it look like, but it's so far past that. He could have 6 5-stars in the house on Thursday night. And it's so far gone, it's not really going to change anything, because I'm not here to tell you Louisville has a loaded roster with a ton of talent that has Final Four potential, but they're not where they are currently combined with last year's roster and this year's roster because of personnel talent. So, you'd like to have a lot of talent. You'll take any 5-star you can get, but that's not why Louisville is struggling. So I think it was just a desperate attempt to try to make it seem as if, hey, despite this being as bad as it is, help's on the way. So it really is. I mean, again, you can add up all these things, and it's you can't. I mean, who would do that? Was that you cover recruiting? Has anybody? That's the most unexpected. It's insulting to make people think this was a real thing. I mean, he was there, he did visit, so it happened. So I guess it's not fake. But the idea that Carter Knox would come and play for Louisville with Kenny Payne, it's just not reality.
I was there at OTE the day that news broke about him taking the visit, and it was one of the weirdest recruiting interviews I could remember in a really long time, because you could tell he was watching every single word as closely as imaginable. Like, I cannot say something to screw this up. So every question, so how long has this visit been scheduled? Yeah, it's been scheduled for a minute, but it was going to happen either way. Like, what? Either way, what? What does that mean? Like, you could tell he was put in a really uncomfortable position that I guarantee you Kenny reached out to Dad and said, I need you. This is kind of the last ditch effort to potentially save me. Maybe if you visit, and who knows, if you commit to me, maybe it forces Josh's hand to keep me for at least the rest of the year. Maybe I could right the ship. Like, I don't know if it was kind of that mindset of let's just hit a single and maybe I could round the bases by the end of the year and save my job. I don't know. But it put Carter in a really uncomfortable position, and I was uncomfortable being there with him talking about it. So I don't think, somebody told me that there was a chance he could commit leaving that visit, that even if it meant nothing on the surface, that he could commit publicly to just, if nothing else, save Kenny's job for the rest of the season in hopes that it does something long term, with the mindset of I have no intention of ever playing for.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it would be. I mean, who would commit to a school under any circumstance whenever the talking point about said program is that the coach is not expected to be there in 48 hours? It's insulting to make people believe that. I can't fault them for trying something, but just, I mean, come on, who would see that as, okay, everybody, let's slow down. Kenny's got this thing figured out. I mean, it's nonsense. Carter Knox was actually scheduled to visit in September, and it just didn't happen. Just never happened. And they have a kid committed, 3-star kid committed, who's never visited, didn't sign. They did not have a single visitor on campus as far as, an official visitor that they're trying to bring in and sign in this current class. Not a single one from, I think, March on. So they're not, I mean, you talk to people and they're not even they haven't been recruiting. I mean, that's not something they've been doing. I mean, they've been maybe here and there at events, but I mean, they don't have a single player signed for next year. And as I've said, anybody who, you could have a good year and you're going to lose players because the portal is what it is now. So I think this staff has actually been operating for the last 6 to 8 months as if they know they're not going to be here long term. And this was a last minute thing. Okay, let's do something to make it look like we're still trying, because Nolan trying to leave, no visitors on campus. Did Kenny just automatically decide, okay, I no longer want freshmen? Whenever I've said since day one, that's the only thing I want to do. No veterans, no veterans in the portal. That's not the right way to do it. We're going to build a program with young people. And, he has no young people in the mix now. So, and now, he's blaming young people like Tyler Johnson. He threw him under the bus. That wasn't necessary. Good luck getting more young people to come and commit to you and play for you when you go out of your way to embarrass them. I mean, it's just, again, it's an absolute circus. And I apologize for, hijacking your show and just bending. I feel like I'm at therapy and I'm on the couch and you guys just listening to me, lose my mind.
That's exactly why we brought you on. So it's a pleasure to be able
Yeah.
to be a part of this.
I
And
get it. I get it.
yeah, call me your therapist. I'm for it. All right, let's circle back to the game itself. What do you know about Kentucky? What is the expectation on your side about how, we do have to talk about personnel 1v1. How does Louisville stack up, and what is the optimistic finish for this and the pessimistic finish for how things unfold on Thursday?
So I'm very familiar with Kentucky. I think this is, a different team than one I can remember. It's still built with mostly young freshmen with a lot of upside. That's not new. That's sort of been the brand overall. But the backcourt, I think they have a foursome backcourt that is as good as anybody in transition. I think they've shown in 3 games this year that you can't run with them. They've made some old dudes look like old dudes, in my opinion. You've got Kansas, which of course they lost that game, but it really came down to the very end where it kind of just fizzled out. But Kentucky, they were the younger team. They didn't have the size. Obviously, they didn't have one of their bigs at that point. But I felt like that was an early sign that, okay, if you want to run with this team, you better buckle up and you better be ready to do it, because not only do they excel in transition, they've now got shooters, and that's what's big difference here. Is I think all 4 of their guards can shoot it. And I think guys like Reed and Rob are better at getting open in transition and firing a 3. And they can also finish in transition. So I think the Miami game was a reminder that, yeah, you can have proven talent, veterans, dudes that have been around a while that a lot of teams would love to have. But at the end of the day, talent, speed, athleticism, that's still the premium. And Kentucky has a lot of that right now. I think they did it against Carolina, not only with the way they played, but also, Kentucky's guys, the young guys, showed a lot of poise in a big moment, whereas I think Carolina's veterans didn't. So Kentucky, like anybody, they can be beat. I think your best chance to beat them is to not try to run with them. And when you've got teams like Miami, Kansas, and Carolina, they're not looking at how you play. They're going to do what they do and assume they're going to do it better than you. And I think they kind of learned the hard way. That's not to say that, if they played 10 times, those teams wouldn't get some wins playing in that same style. But the best chance to beat Kentucky, and it doesn't mean you're going to, but is to slow it down and try to make them guard you for 85 to 90% of the shot clock. And maybe you get a breakdown because they're young, they're still learning. Maybe they risk shooting a passing lane like a Dillingham, gets risky, or somebody tries to block a shot. And maybe you get a breakdown, you get to the foul line. I think on the other end, if you're going to try to defend them, kind of dare them to go one-on-one, and good luck trying to stop them. Not a lot of teams have the ability to do that. So this matchup specifically, Louisville's going to try to run with them, because that's when they've had their best. That's when they've had their best success. When they play Texas, Indiana, even Virginia Tech, I think those are games where Louisville has, the players kind of are playing to the level of their competition, right? They're not lining up against Virginia Tech and going up against dudes they just can't believe are there. And they're so, it's not, personnel's not the biggest issue that Louisville has. So when they do that, I think they find themselves where Sky Clark can get buckets in transition. Trey White, Tyler Johnson's been a bright spot. I think he's still learning, but he's been able to really dictate pace and just make some things happen for you. I think their front court is a big mess. Huntley Hatfield has shown it at times, but really he's been inconsistent since his time at Tennessee. So this game specifically, I think Louisville's going to try to play the way Kentucky's playing, and it'll backfire in a major way. It may be closer early on than people expect. Like I could see second TV timeout, Louisville's within like 6 or 7, and then I just imagine Kentucky's going to go on a run. And this is what happens when you have teams in this situation. All it takes is a big hit of adversity, and you can tell yourself, hey, lock in, block out the noise, we got this. But the human element is a powerful thing, and these guys know what's being said about them. They know their record, and it's happened. It happened against DePaul. It happened against Arkansas State, and against Pepperdine. Fortunately for them, that run never happened. Pepperdine never really did anything to kind of grab momentum, even if it was brief. Louisville kind of held on for the whole way, and they won. That won't be the case, and I think when you really when you see how bad things truly are, it's going to be whenever there's a big run. And these guys, I don't want to say they quit and they just completely, don't care, but it adds up, man. It takes its toll on you. And these guys, I mean, they know they're humans. They know what's being said about them. They know their coaches. I mean, the athletic director met with a couple of the players, and it's essentially to talk about, should the guy still be the coach here? So like, they're aware, and it's going to be a road game for them. There's going to be way more blue there than red. It'll be a beatdown. The only chance that it's not like all time bad is if Calipari just decides he doesn't want to do that. But last year he didn't. I mean, Cal's a competitor. He's not gonna, hey, let's make sure we only win by 15. He's not gonna do that. That's just not how he's wired, and he shouldn't do that. So I think this will be one of the all-time most lopsided games in this rivalry series. And if you know anything about both teams right now, I can't say that you shouldn't be surprised if that's what happens.
There are some narratives and talking points that kind of connect the two programs in terms of personnel. Sky Clark, obviously a former Kentucky commit, was seen, before pre-ACL injury, was seen as kind of the future of this program as the lead guard. Brandon Huntley Hatfield, cousin of Alex Poythress, was once seen as a almost Kentucky lock before things unfolded, transferred high schools, and ends up signing with Tennessee. And then obviously the DJ Wagner weird debacle that was with Milt on staff. And, a lot of Louisville fans thought they had that one in the bag. And Aaron Bradshaw was another one that they kind of thought they were in a good spot for. So are we so far removed from that stuff where none of it really matters, or could that present an edge that could complicate things ever so slightly either direction?
I think things have gotten so bad that it's not something that you mentioned the Milt and DJ thing, and not that I forgot that happened, but it's just I think the majority of the time spent thinking about this program from the Louisville side, as far as their fans, is about what's next. When is this over? When can we at least know that it's going to be over and we're going to start anew? So, I don't think that, there should have been some more signs that when Kenny did get, and he recruited decently, and that's what's crazy. He actually put together a good class in the end, but it was after all the guys that Louisville fans felt like they had a good chance of getting because of Kenny's relationship with Purvis Ellison and the Wagner family, and like none of that materialized. And looking back, you got me thinking about it. There was really never any indication that DJ was going to go anywhere other than Kentucky. I just think it is so rare that you hire a staffer that is related to a player, and that it doesn't, it just happened in college football, right? With the kid that flipped from Georgia to Nebraska. So that is an obvious thing people would pay attention to. But, to DJ's credit, he never did anything to hint that he was going to do it. He's pretty tight-lipped about everything. But I think from the time he was in middle school, everybody knew because of his father's relationship that he was going to go play for John Calipari no matter where he was. So, we got our hopes up about some things, and I don't think we were crazy to see some potential dots being connected. But now that I'm reflecting on it, we were stupid to think that they were going to get Bradshaw or Wagner, just because, they were always going to go to Kentucky. And Purvis Ellison, he's close with Kenny Payne as like a friend, but Kenny has publicly said that Purvis begged him not to take the Louisville job. And, there's not been a single guy that Louisville's been in the mix for that they landed that was a Purvis Ellison, recruit or played for his AAU team. So, yeah, I'd forgotten all about the whole DJ Wagner, Milt Wagner thing, because that's where we are. Like it's an afterthought now because this thing is so far gone.
Unless you listen to Jay Williams on a nationally televised broadcast.
That was great.
Say in the middle of nowhere that DJ was going to just up and transfer. Like what? That was another part of this debacle that was just like,
well, nobody would even believe that was remotely true. Like that was just what Jay Williams does. And when he does games, which is not common, right? That was a rare thing that they put him in the color analyst role for ESPN. He knows basketball, obviously, and he's a big personality with ESPN, but that's not really his lane, doing that job. And what he does is he just ends up turning it into his own talk show. And he just started rambling and saying that. And like, everybody's like, what the hell is this guy talking about? And it's nonsense.
That's why it was almost so dumb that it almost kind of had he couldn't have just come up with that out of his ass. Like that couldn't have just been
right. people are probably thinking like, well, somebody had to say something for him to say that. And I'm here to tell you, I think Jay Williams was just kind of being a dumbass, if I'm being honest with you.
He was just spitting, just
Yeah.
time of day. He was just ready to get that thing rolling. All right, so let's start rounding home here. What would be the nail in the coffin? Done. I mean, would it take a sea of blue to enter the Yum Center on Thursday, and for it to be a 40-point beatdown in front of 12 U of L fans? Like, is that what would be the, all right, Kenny Payne is fired on Friday, it's time to start looking to what's next?
I mean, a loss to your, I mean, if they lose by 35 points to Kentucky, and of course there'll be a lot of blue there, more blue than red. I mean, that would be embarrassing, but it's not, I'll do post game. I'll go live on the radio as soon as that game ends. And maybe because it's Kentucky, there'll be more anger about it, but nobody's shocked when you lose to Arkansas State and DePaul and Chattanooga and Kentucky Wesleyan. So the administration, in my opinion, I know there's a lot more that goes into that than I would ever know, but it's just wild to me, Jack, to think, okay, yeah, that's what did it. That's what made you realize this was not working out. A loss to maybe the best team in the country right now. That's what made you decide, okay, here we go. We should probably consider pulling the plug. So I think the scenario you put out there is in fact what is going to happen. Will it lead to him being fired on Friday? I doubt it. I just don't think you can put that together that quickly, that close to Christmas. And the board, I mean, the board has to approve whatever decision Josh Hurd makes and the EULA board makes. And, there's no way they do that by then. There could be a report from somebody that says, hey, Kenny Payne is out and they're going through the process of getting it figured out. That wouldn't shock me if their report comes out Friday from somebody that is connected to college basketball. And then you've got a long break between the Kentucky game and their first game. And they've got, I think, nearly 13 days off between this Kentucky game and the first game in 2024. So that would be the timeline to do it. But yeah, I mean, to me, it would be a lot of people have said this, and I'm going to get your thoughts on this. A lot of people have said, well, you don't want to do it. You don't want to have an interim coach for the UK game. Why not? I mean, do you think that the interim coach would feel unfairly treated? Like, that's what a lot of people have said is, well, you don't want to do it before the UK game, make him sit in it, he's not going to be embarrassed. He's going to be smiling and hugging Calipari. Like, if you were going to do it, you should have done it a week ago. Why they didn't do it then, I don't know. But I mean, my guess is that if it plays out the way I think it's going to, is that during the holiday break, he'll be let go. But again, I've been in this pattern for a while. Nothing would shock me.
I guess the only counter to it is weird stuff happens with when interim coaches take over. Like, sometimes it just takes one rally, but this was the one guy that the players connected to in some weird reason, in some odd fashion.
You're right.
And that's the guy that we could play for. We are emotionally invested in playing for him, and that's where you get weird upsets and wonky finishes and stuff. So I don't necessarily think, but if Josh had a mindset of we gotta win this game, I don't think Kenny Payne is the one to win that game. Like, no, I know that might be a little on the nose, Kenny Payne winning or not winning those games, but
well, so with Kenny, I mean, the thought of him not coaching the game because he got fired, there's a lot of folks that said, well, Calipari will beat you by 100 if that's the case because he'll be sticking up for his friend. He'll beat him by 100 if Kenny's coaching or he's in the stands. Like, I don't think that's that big of a factor to where you can make a decision based off that. And what you just said is a good point, and it gets brought up a lot on my show from people that say, look, I'm worried if they do an interim coach that they get some kind of momentum, some kind of a run. If that's the case, there's no scenario any of these guys on the staff have a chance. You've got a better chance of being the next head coach at Louisville than anybody on this current staff. And I'm not exaggerating, because Kenny could be 500 as a coach top to bottom. And if the arena still looks like it looks like, the fans are still just apathetic, there's no life at all in the program from engagement and support, that's one of the reasons why you make a move. You add it in there with the loss and the embarrassment and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I don't think anybody has to worry about if the interim coach has success, they may decide to keep him. There's no scenario that happens.
Is there any scenario where Kenny Payne is the head coach next season?
I want to say no, but I will also add, I'm just guessing like anybody else. I'm looking and evaluating what's right in front of me to where I'm saying there's just no chance that anybody would say, yeah, let's keep doing this. This is working. Like there's nobody could do that with a straight face. Nobody that advocated and supported Kenny from the jump. And I mean people who have influence within the community, influence within the program. Those people, their silence is loud as hell. You don't hear from them. You know why? Because what are they going to say? Look at what's going on. So that tells me there's no scenario. I can't even wrap my mind around it. But the athletic director, the administration, there's been zero transparency. There's been zero acknowledgement that this is what it is. So if we're just going to base it off of what the administration and the athletic department is telling us, this is fine. No big. I mean, so I know deep down they can't believe that, and if they do, they're not fit to be in the position that they're in. But to answer your question, I'll say yes. But again, the fact we've never had anybody tell us that like this was unusual. I mean, there's not been any. I mean, they sent out invoices for season tickets this offseason as if like, hey, here's the bill, pay us. Like there was no like, hey, because we need your money. I mean, there should have been some kind of a message that says, look, we know last year was bad. We appreciate your support so much. We need your support to help get this thing turned around. And there's been none of that. So I don't think he'll be the coach next year. I just don't see how that would play out. But I mean, I'm guessing like anybody else.
I see this vision in my head of, okay, what if Louisville does somehow upset Kentucky on Thursday, and that leads to a string of X number of victories, and they're like, all it took was that one statement. And what weird position Josh Heird would be in if that wild, highly unlikely, if not impossible scenario were to unfold. But it's just like we're at that awkward stage where they haven't fired him this point. You'd think that there would be a breaking point of after Arkansas State. Yep, sorry, we got to just cut the cord.
And
there's no business. So if we're already here, what's a little bit more, and what's a little bit more, and what's to the end of the season? Are we really going to have a game changer interim come in and save the day? It's already a lost cause, so maybe just ride the wave and see what. I just kind of have that little inkling of, okay, well, what if? And that's a really tough no man's land for the Louisville fan base. And I don't know what you do at that point.
I mean, if you were going to do it, you should have done it after the back-to-back losses to DePaul and Arkansas State, because what happened is that the next game you played, I mean, nobody's that shocked when you beat Pepperdine too, because Pepperdine's Pepperdine. We know you could lose to anybody, but you have better players than Pepperdine and, you know, Chattanooga and whoever else they played at home that's terrible. So by doing that, you now have fans thinking like, okay, well, like, should we be happy or what? They played better, they won, but like there's reports from people who we all believe that you're going to fire him. So like, what do we do now? So, you know, I think that, I don't want to say it backfired on him, but if they're competitive with Kentucky and it's a close game and it's not obvious that Calipari's doing some kind of shenanigans to help his buddy out, then that would be another sign that like Kenny should have never, like you should never be this bad if you can compete in that game. So as you've said, it's I think it's damn near impossible that Louisville comes close to pulling off some kind of an upset. But if they do, again, add it to the list of things where you just look around and say, you can't make this up. This is insanity. But I think they lose, and they lose in a major way. And it probably will be, you know, my guess is that it'll be the last game he coaches. But I don't know. Again, I'm just guessing.
All right, let's wrap up here. I'll get your official prediction from you. There's already talk of Jay Wright buying a house in Prospect, and what is next? It's Facebook rumblings, and
I get all my information from Facebook too.
Kentucky fans have dealt with Billy Donovan buying horse farm conversations for years, so it's about time you guys have to deal with something similar. But yeah, Jay Wright is the name that all Louisville fans want and are delusional and thinking is a realistic option. What would be that next option if this does go down the path we are all anticipating? Who would be a home run hire or somebody within reason in your eyes?
I mean, I think the Jay Wright thing is only brought up because of one reason, because he did work with Josh Heird at Villanova, but I don't think many think that that's realistic. Maybe they want him to at least just say no, but I mean, I don't even think Josh would ask him, because I think Josh knows that he's not unemployed. He's retired. Like, he left the game, and I doubt he has any interest in coming back. But, you know, this job will, I think, get clearly more interest than the last time around because of obvious reasons. You now no longer have to worry about the NCAA giving you some kind of a crazy penalty. And I think there's been enough. I mean, we're still early on in the NIL era and the portal, but now this time around, there's more proof that you can quickly flip things around if you go out and you add guys in the portal and you balance your roster and you really, it's all about the portal. So I think that will keep folks from being fearful of like such a rebuild. But realistic candidates out there. I mean, a lot of people say Mick Cronin. I don't love the idea of Mick Cronin because one, I don't want people telling me I look like him, and I get that a lot, and that's an insult. Like, when people tell me that, oh, you look like Mick Cronin, I don't think they realize they're insulting me, or maybe they are. Maybe they realize it and they don't care. But he has a huge buyout. Like his buyout will go to 18 or 16 million after this year. That makes him, to me, not realistic. And you can do a lot worse than Mick Cronin. He's a fine coach. Your floor would be not that low, if that makes sense. Like you're not going to be bad. But the idea of you really getting where you want to be, it could happen with Mick. But to me, he's one of those guys that's been around a long time. He's had success, but to me, he's never really entered that level of, okay, he's one of the better coaches in the game. Maybe some see it that way. I mean, the one Final Four he has was the COVID year where he had to play to get into the tournament. So I don't think him is super realistic. Chris Beard, I mean, I think that's a realistic guy that you could get. Obviously, we all know what happened at Texas. Would Louisville be willing to bring him on, given that story, that situation, and some things that have happened at their program? I don't know the answer to that. I know that if they don't hire him, somebody else is going to. He's a phenomenal coach, and you could afford him. His buyout's not crazy. Jerome Tang is a guy that I really, really like, but Jerome Tang also, it's not his fault, but there's not a whole lot of, he's only been a head coach for a year and some change. So it's not like you can go back over a long period of time and see this guy's track record. However, and I think you probably know this too, Jack, he has a lot. I mean, people are not surprised he's having the success that he has because he was believed to be one of these assistant coaches that was just waiting for an opportunity. He got it, and he did exactly what a lot of folks thought and hoped Kenny Payne would end up doing. A name that's going to be put out there that I'm not saying he'd be the worst hire and that you wouldn't have success, but Dusty May, I mean, he's got some juice right now because of their Final Four run, and they're a good team this year, but he was under 500 as a coach at Florida Atlantic the 4 years before he went to the Final Four. So maybe a light switched and he's now rolling. But to me, I think you would want a guy that's a little bit more proven than that. And Shaka Smart's name comes up. I like Shaka Smart, his style of play. He's a guy that I would tell you that when Mac was hired and even last go around, I just kind of felt like, I don't know about it. But now I think we all realize you're not going to be able to go get one of the best coaches in the country just because of the situation. And I think he'd be a fine coach here, but I don't know how realistic he is because he's back in his hometown in Milwaukee at Marquette. He's already had the big job and he left. Like, I think there's a lot of folks who assume he was fired. He walked away. Now, he might have been fired eventually, but that wasn't a good fit for him at Texas. So he's now, I think, in a really comfortable spot at Marquette, but Louisville could pay him more money. Maybe he'd be interested. So what's unfortunate, and it's really sad for Kenny, is that we're to the point now where there'll be people that have strong opinions one way or the other about every candidate, but the fan base is kind of united that no matter what, we know it's not Kenny. So whoever it is, we'll find a way to get excited and embrace them because that's just where we are. And it's not to say anybody off the street could come in and do a better job than Kenny, but it's also one of those things you could say and then give it thought and think, okay, anybody might be able to get 9 wins and 40 something tries. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but those I think are realistic candidates. Billy Donovan, not realistic. Brad Stevens, not realistic. But people are going to mention it because, that's just what coaching searches do. They bring out the crazies.
Oh, well, Nick, this has been a blast, man. We are looking forward to this matchup. I don't think you're giving it enough credit. I think once the ball is tipped, I think we'll kind of start ignoring the noise that is surrounding the game and focus on, I don't think there's ever been a time, and maybe this is just as unprecedented times, that I have not gotten up for a UK U of L game by the time tip-off came. So this is obviously weird circumstances, but I feel like as we inch closer in the next day or two, maybe the juice will start coming back. I don't know. Maybe it's just wishful thinking because this is just such an odd year and it's sad.
Yeah, this can't be that fun for you all. I mean, you'll enjoy it when it happens, but like the lead up has probably been pretty lifeless on both sides, I would imagine, as far as back and forth, right? Obviously Kentucky fans feel great about their team right now, but Louisville fans haven't even been able to really pick their face up off the mat. So maybe you're right. It's competitive early on, but I think when adversity does hit, I think that's whenever the noise will creep back in and these guys will unfortunately just kind of, come to.
Well, let's get you out of here with a final score prediction. How bad is the damage? What do you think? How do you think it unfolds on Thursday night in the Yum Center?
89-61. That's my score prediction.
Ooh, I'm going Kentucky 91, Louisville 70. I think
Okay.
I feel pretty good about that one, Nick. This has been a blast, man. I know you have a whole day's worth of a week's worth of content to get through, and you'll probably rehash a lot of the same stuff. So appreciate you using this platform as a vent session for you. We certainly appreciate it.
Thank you. Send me the bill for the therapy session, Jack. I appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. We'll kick you off and we'll get pay some bills. But man, appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us, Nick.
Thanks, guys.
Well, with that, as he's talking about the UK U of L seating arrangement, I was kind of thinking, how crazy would it be for that to be a true sea of blue? So there is an opportunity for that, and you can do that by using our friends at Game Time. You should not have to worry when you are buying tickets. Now isn't the time for guesswork with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the best price guaranteed. Game Time does all the hard work for you. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats, find exclusive flash deals and sponsor deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. With zone deals, you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for an average of 18% savings. And the Game Time guarantee means that you will always get the best price if you find tickets in the same section and row for less. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. I have looked up what the UK U of L game looks like on Game Time, and it's reasonable. There is no excuse for Kentucky fans to not make a statement in this matchup by showing up and showing up loud in the Yum Center. The flash deal that pulled up for me, $133 all in, so no extra fees, none of that extra nonsense. $112 is very realistic in the ballpark there for the Yum Center. So go hang out with our friends at Game Time, and you'll see us there. It's going to be a great time. We are looking forward to that matchup. Go there with our friends at Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code KSR for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code KSR for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. While you're I'm fascinated to see what the line is going to be for this one, because it could kind of name whatever it is, and I could kind of see it unfolding. But see it with FanDuel. The NBA in-game college basketball season are back. Join FanDuel, America's #1 sports book right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That is $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options including spreads, player props, overs, and unders, and more. We've been on a heater with our FanDuel parlays before the game. Sean's was a hit. I think mine was one leg off. But, if you're using ours as singles, as straight bets, then you're sitting very pretty right now. So make sure you follow along on Twitter. We post those before each big game. Did that before the UNC game, and we're right on the money there. So keep doing that. Visit FanDuel.com/Pilgrim. That is FanDuel.com/Pilgrim. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL, 21 and older, and present in Kentucky. First online real money wager only. $5 pregame money line wager required. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Last one before we get out of here. Source to Say podcast is brought to you by Andy Ludicky and MyPerfectFranchise.net. Andy is a franchise consultant as well as franchise owner and helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. His services are 100% free, and he is here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. You can learn more and contact Andy anytime at www.myperfectfranchise.net. We got Cats versus the Cards. Going to be a fun matchup. I know it's a little bit weird this time around, but hang in there. We will get through it, and hopefully it results in continued momentum for the Kentucky Wildcats following an awesome win over the North Carolina Tar Heels in the CBS Sports Classic. Let's keep this momentum rolling. Feel bad for Kenny Payne, but it might be the end of it, a very quick era for him. We'll see how that unfolds, but could be the last time you get to see Kenny Payne as a head coach, so that's going to be a lot of talking points and intriguing storylines to get throughout the week, and we're going to be a part of it. We're going to keep rolling with these sources says. Appreciate us, all of our listeners, for the first one, for the post game with North Carolina, the ones for tonight, and then obviously we'll have one after the Louisville game playing on Friday. So we will be back for a jam-packed Sources Say podcast then. We will see you on Friday.